Now we get to our guest speaker, Dr. Mario Motta. He needs no introduction, but I'm going to read what I have on the board here anyway. So, and as you notice, Mario, it's a very trimmed down version of your bio, but Mario is a graduate of Boston College with a BS in physics and biology and an MD from Tufts Medical School. He has been long active in organized medicine, both in the American Medical Association, that's the AMA, and in the Massachusetts Medical Society, the MMS, holding a number of posts through the years. Mario has enjoyed a lifelong interest in astronomy and has hand-built several telescopes, including his entirely homemade 32-inch f6 relay telescope and 3 observatories to do astronomical research. He has served as a president of the Amateur Telescope Makers of Boston and has served as a council member and then president of the AAVSO, the American Association of Variable Star Observers, and has served on the board of the International Dark Sky Association. Mario has been awarded the Las Cumbres Award from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific in 2003 and the Walter Scott Houston Award from the Northeast section of the Astronomical League and the Henry Alcott Award from the AAVSO in 2017. Finally, in 2013, the International Astronomical Union awarded Mario an asteroid in part for his work on light pollution as well as amateur research. Asteroid 133537, Mario Motta, is currently shining at magnitude plus 20.9 in the constellation of Perseus. Don't try to image it. It's pretty close to, well, it's behind the sun, but the sun will be a great interference. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Mario, you should be able to jump right in and share your screen. And let's all of us give a nice round of applause to our very own Mario Motta.
It's an interesting story. I was invited to be part of a UN meeting regarding, that was put up by the International Astronomical Union and by Spain. They always have to have one country who actually anchors it. And the whole purpose of it was it started off to protect observatories, and then with Starlink, by the way, that's Musk, not Amazon. He's the other one. They really got concerned because of the threat to observational astronomy. So there's 5 parts to this meeting. I was involved with the human health section, and I was asked primarily because of my write-ups in the AMA, which pointed out the dangers of excessive light pollution. So you already went through this, but this is more for the sake of new members, since we haven't really met for 2.5 years. I'm sure there are lots of new members who actually don't know me. So, anyways, I'll say one thing. I teach medical students. They come to the office and to the hospital and residents, but I also got a professorship, associate professorship to teach astronomy at Tufts undergraduate, which I did for a couple of years when they needed someone to do it, since it was an undergraduate beginner's course for non-majors, and no real professor wanted to dirty their hands with unwashed non-science majors. So they asked me to do it, but I had a lot of fun doing it. So let me move on here. This is my observatory, and it's in Gloucester. And my sky is about 5.4, 5.5 mag, depending whether you're east or west. That's my scope. It's 32-inch. Scott Milligan, which many of you know, designed it, since I only know how to make Newtonians, but this is a relay scope. And Scott basically gave me all the designs, and he helped me do some of the grinding and polishing, and all the mechanical parts I made, and ground and polished the main mirror. He actually did the Mangan secondary, which is up here. So give him credit. And then it has 4 correctors. And this is my picture of M1 through that scope. So why is the AMA interested in light pollution? I get asked that all the time, especially by physicians and lighting engineers who basically tell me to stay in my lane and leave lighting to them. It's sometimes very nastily, but I'll give you the reason, and this is why the UN finally got involved. So light pollution affects human health. It interferes with circadian rhythms. You can see my pointer, right? Okay, good. So it suppresses melatonin, and that accounts for much of the human health effects, and that's becoming a major problem worldwide. It increases hormonally related cancers, increases obesity, diabetes, and mood disorders, sleep disturbances. Glare makes roadways dangerous to drive, and it's grossly affecting the environment. 60% of everything that lives outdoors needs dark at night. So for that reason, this got set up originally in October of 2020. The first meeting was supposed to be in the Canary Islands. A funny thing happened called COVID, and it became virtual. So I spent 6 months working on the program and different parts of the light pollution part that I was assigned to. And then the plan was to meet for the final product in this past year in 2021. And I actually had tickets, a hotel reserved, and so did everyone else. And we're all set to go. Got COVID clearance, got tested. And 1 week before the meeting, the volcano erupted. I don't know if you all recall La Palma, the volcano. Well, that's where we were supposed to meet. So everyone had to cancel literally at the last minute, and it became another virtual meeting. These are the internet people internationally, as well as myself. I'm here somewhere. Where am I? Here I am. Here are the leaders of the groups and everyone across the world. There were, I think, 42 countries represented. We were supposed to meet in La Palma, where the Europeans have their large observatories. You've probably heard of Tenerife, but La Palma is much more remote and very quiet, I'm told. They have their optical observatories up top there. This is where the meeting was supposed to be. And is the observatory, which I did not go visit since it became a virtual meeting. So the reason I got invited is because the AMA information. So I'll give you a sort of a combination of both. That led to the Roland meeting, which stands for Responsible Outdoor Lighting at Night. And I'm halfway through that meeting right now. That's a European-wide meeting, though, but it really is worldwide. I give a talk tomorrow early afternoon, similar to what I'm going to talk to you tonight about. But all the world's major researchers on light pollution are at this meeting, so I'm pleased to be part of it. Here's the Roland International Conference program, and as you can see, you'll probably recognize quite a number of names here, at least I do anyways. And I had an article in that that some of you have commented on. So here's my view of the Trifid Nebula. I always throw in a few pictures, taken with the 32. So what was the purpose of this meeting? I was invited for the light pollution, but again, it started off to protect astronomical observatories. A few years back when the planning for this started, people were getting alarmed across the world that the observatories are going to become obsolete because of the encroaching light pollution. So the first and primary reason for this program was to protect existing astronomical observatories and try to get a UN treaty on that worldwide. Next came satellite constellations. We'll talk more about that in a little while, but the number of satellites that Musk and others want to put up is, to excuse a pun, astronomical. And images will, any images listening will testify to the fact that anytime you get images of the sky, you're going to get a satellite trail every third or fourth. If Musk gets his way, you're going to get 5 or 6 satellite trails every image because the sky will be populated by endless amounts of satellite trails. The Vera Rubin Observatory is particularly threatened. That's the new one going up in Chile that's supposed to take several degrees of sky per image and basically cover the entire sky every 3 days, looking for transient objects. That's going to be a fantastic advancement, except if that many satellites get put up, because it's so sensitive, it'll be essentially useless. So that observatory may not even fulfill its primary goal if Musk gets his way. Radio astronomy, because of all the satellites and communication to Earth, there are problems with that. Dark sky oases, we'll talk about that, and light pollution, which is the section I was involved with. So why is the UN, why was the AMA and then the UN involved with lighting? Primarily because, and I'll say this, in 2012, I produced a report with the AMA on human health effects of light pollution. And I had some help, Richard Stevens, George Brainerd. These were all people who were tops in their field. I invited them to help me write a report. I'll fully admit I was just a glorified editor. It was all their research. But the issue is that when I produced the report, it made a splash in the medical literature, but the lighting industry completely ignored it, absolutely ignored it, not a peep. So in 2016, when the US is about to switch everything to LEDs, and cities were starting to do that, we produced a report specifically on LEDs, saying basically do LEDs, but avoid blue and shield them. That's all it said, basically. It's a 36-page report with lots of medical peer-reviewed papers referenced, but you would think that's pretty mild and common sense. The lighting industry went ballistic, absolutely ballistic. If I got nasty letters from the IES, which is the International Electrical, Illuminating Engineering Society of North America. And they basically sent me a letter saying, you're nothing but a bunch of docs, stay in your lane, get out of the lighting industry, you have no concept of what you're doing, and this is our turf. That's literally what the paper said. And they were persistent. They wanted a retraction, and to the point where they would send a letter every week to the AMA until finally, at the time I was on the Council on Science Public Health, and they asked me, should we invite them to a conference? Should we modify things? I says, we have 126 peer-reviewed paper. I hope everyone knows what a peer-reviewed paper is. I mean, that's basically, it's proven and it's been reviewed by experts. 126 peer-reviewed papers that give our side. They haven't produced one paper that says they're right. So basically they craft a letter saying, we'll be happy to meet with you if you provide any evidence-based information that we can discuss. It's now 6 years later, the IES has not produced one paper, not one. Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, they can blow smoke until they actually prove anything they want to say. So for that reason, the international committees got involved to protect the environment and protect the observatories, and I got invited because of to represent the AMA. So dark sky oases, the UN is actually quite interested in this. They want to protect a number of places around the world. Now we call them IDA dark sky places in the US, but they call them dark sky oases internationally. And here's the number, there's 223 as of earlier this year. And they're broken down from dark sky astronomy site down to a dark sky community. And these are places that agree to keep light down to a minimum. There are and more are being added on all the time. The IDA is part of that as well. So dark sky oasis primarily, again, this started off to protect observatories. That's the scientific value. But it is important for the environment and biodiversity. I don't know if people are aware, but we're in the middle of an insect apocalypse right now. There are 40% less insects on the earth right now than there were 30 years ago. That's a huge decline. I mean, that would be considered a mass extinction, which is what it is. And some of it is insecticides, some of it's loss of environment, a lot of it's just light pollution. And that's one thing we can do. How many people see fireflies? I used to have them in Gloucester all the time. Just 15 years ago, I rarely see them now. That's because of light pollution. If the male and female fireflies can't see each other, you get no baby fireflies. It's as simple as that. But it involves all animals. Every animal out there needs a dark night. In fact, there was a great talk by someone from Tufts, a research student who I attended, called Why is Your Windshield Clean? Think about it. 30, 40 years ago, all windshields used to have bugs all over them, right? How many people complain about bugs on their windshield anymore? Right? You don't get that anymore. You know why? They're all dead. There aren't that many bugs out there. Think about that. I was on the human health side, and it affects insomnia, obesity, high cholesterol because of stress hormones, diabetes, increase in heart disease, and cancers. And we'll talk more about that in a little while. Dark sky oasis has an economic value. How many people drive out? We on our email site, we get requests all the time. Where's a good place to go observe, right? People go up to Maine, go up to the Berkshires. That's happening worldwide. People want to have a dark sky place to go to, and they're starting to be regulated by governments. And hopefully this will lead to international treaties to strengthen that and encourage it to get along. Astrotourism is becoming a big deal. People actually travel to dark sky sites like we do. I mean, we don't think anything of it. We think that's a natural thing to do. You talk to the average person out there, who have never seen a dark sky, don't think anything of it until they actually see a dark sky, and their first reaction is, oh my God, what have I been missing all these years, right? So it is an important thing, and I'm glad the UN's getting involved. And then there's cultural value for reasons for keeping the sky dark. This is my view of M81. So this is the Bortle scale. I'm in Gloucester, I'm at 4.5. In Florida, I'm at 6. But I would bet very few people in this club have ever been to a 1. You've probably been to a 2 or 3. A 1, you have to be these days on the top of a mountain in the Andes. I've been there a couple of times to places like that, and it just blows your socks off. There's so many stars, I can't recognize the constellations. Until you see that, and understand what I mean. When you can't recognize, like Leo, and I've tried this, because there's just too many stars in the sky, you understand just what we're losing and missing. So to give you an impact of that, at 5.5, we got basically in half the sky, close to 1,900 stars, or above 10 degrees, 1,100 stars. When you go to 4.5, you're down to 368 stars. If you live in Somerville like Sal, you're at Bortle 2, you're seeing only 38 stars in the sky. So from the absolute best, like if we had no lights, 26,000 stars, down to 22 stars because of our light pollution, is just an amazing drop of sky visibility. So we want to protect the lighting, not just for the observatories and for human health, but because it's in an environmental disaster happening before our eyes. So the UN is recommending, this is a 296-page report, and I'll give you the URL so you can download it yourself if you want. It's well referenced. That limit the illumination to where it should be. And there should be master planning and zoning. This is Milan. And if you notice the very white brights, those are the 4000 K lights that are starting to replace the older high pressure sodium. And you can see what a difference that'll make if they replace them all. Fortunately, people are trying to put a stop to that over there. Environmentally sensitive areas are everywhere. Okay, it turns out. So here's a bridge that's lit up. There's a famous example from, I think, Southern Oregon and Northern California, right near the border there, where someone thought it would be fantastic to light up the bridge, just so you can see it from miles away because it looks pretty that way, right? So they put up these 4000 K lights. Salmon used to run under the bridge. They used to have like 30,000 salmon. Within a couple of years, it was down to 500 salmon. And they went crazy trying to figure out what's killing all the salmon. So a researcher from Oregon figured it out. The salmon, by tracking them and tagging them, the salmon swim upstream, but they will not pass the light. For some reason, they're afraid of crossing the light, so they stay downstream. And basically they die there instead of going upstream. And in the daylight, they don't move much apparently. So bottom line is, it was all the lights from the bridge. They now have in that bridge, they shut it off for 2 months during salmon season, and the salmon population has come back. They should just get rid of the lights. It's completely useless. It doesn't light up the roadway. It just lights up the water. I mean, those are the things you don't think about, but every lighting has an effect on the outdoors. This is the third recommendation from the UN committee. Illuminate levels for outdoor areas that are proper, make it even illumination, and don't over illuminate. It's all common sense recommendations. Adaptive lighting is coming into its own. Fortunately, in New Hampshire, people are cheap and you don't have a lot of street lighting except in the very centers of towns. But one thing that can be done for places that want light is, especially for rural and suburban areas, you just have the lights with a sensor and just turn on when a car's approaching. There's no reason they have to be on 24/7. That's one of the suggestions to be considered internationally. That's actually going to be going over pretty big in Europe. Watch the light distribution and control it. Design the luminaires so that they only shine the light where it's supposed to go and not above the horizon like this. Intrusive light. Would you want to live in that apartment over here? Okay, not at all. Okay, so these lights should be shielded. They should be on a lower pole, and you should have shades so you don't shine into people's bedrooms. That affects human health. There should be glare control, and that means shielding and proper design. You know, many people have trouble driving at night, especially the older you get. I've got a couple of slides on that later. And whenever patients say something wrong with my eyes, I say, well, no, not really, you're older, but it's really just stupid engineers. If lights were engineered properly, people could drive. Most older people have trouble driving, having no idea that they should put their ire on bad engineers rather than the fact that they're getting older. There's no reason for that. Here's a well-designed field. Notice the light doesn't go outside. Compare that to some of the fields you have around here. It's night and day, right? So the spectral content of emitted light is important. You don't want blue. Blue is what causes most of the damage. It's 10 times more effective at suppressing melatonin than red or green. So you want to limit the blue. A There are LEDs that emit no blue. They're called amber LEDs instead of blue LEDs, and eliminates it completely. They're using that in Sherbrooke, Canada. I wish that would catch on. Completely eliminates the problem. Doesn't cost any more. But the problem is, I should explain what color correlated temperature is. It's a archaic way of describing color, but this goes back to the 18th century, before lighting was even invented. But they're still using that system. So if you take a poker iron, put it in a coal burning stove, it'll turn dull red, then it'll turn brighter, then if you get it hot enough, it'll turn white. Okay, that's color correlated temperature, and it's related to the light emitted by a hot iron. But for some reason, they use that system to describe, even though it has nothing to do with the temperature of the LED. But so when you see 2200 K, that's kind of a reddish light. When you see 3000, it's a whitish light, slightly off white. 4000 K is brilliant white light that basically blinds you. So the AMA first 5 years ago recommended less than 3000 or lower. The lighting industry keeps forgetting the or lower. We put that in case there are advancements, which there are. The UN, knowing that there's advances now, is recommending 2200 to 3000 and make them tunable. And white light is only for special areas where you absolutely need it, or in daytime in a apartment, in an office building. You want the brighter light, because if you get bathed with 4000 K in daylight, then at nighttime you get a better bounce in terms of melatonin release. But you definitely don't anyone put 4000 K in your house. You'll go nuts. People don't realize how bright that is and how awful it is. So finally, controlling color facades, that's becoming a problem because advertisers want to be everywhere. And light measurements to monitor everything. So that in effect is the 10 recommendations from the UN that's in the report. If you think about it, it's really just common sense. And it's not that difficult to achieve, but it's revolutionary because the lighting industry for years has been completely ignoring it and pushing back. They've come around of late. The IS is partnered, I don't know what that means yet, with the IDA, but hopefully that means there'll be some more basically cooperation. The CIE, which is the European version of the IES, is much more committed to watching their lighting, probably because Europe is so much worse than the US across the entire continent. But they're committed now and to partnering to lowering light levels. So that's a very good sign. And hopefully if the Europeans do that, it'll push the IS and the US to do that as well. So the recommendation, the COPUOS stands for Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. So this whole thing was under that section of the UN. So the default condition I like, no artificial light. If you don't need the light, don't put it up, okay? Again, there's no reason to put up a light in a park or in a area where there is no one there. An ecological reserve should be limited, and no light above 500 nanometers. That's basically green light, so no blue light whatsoever. If phosphor should be 22,000 K or less. Okay, don't forget the IAS blasted me for suggesting it shouldn't be above 3,000. That's because that's the best we had at the time. But now the UN's coming out and saying, actually, much lower is better. Let me put things in perspective. The high pressure sodium that we're all used to in the past, that's 1,800. So 2,200 is whiter than those. Okay, so it's not that big a deal. And exterior light should be below the horizontal. This is 4565. So I was a part of the bioenvironment. What time is it? Okay. So, and we basically stated blue rich light is a health risk, and got plenty of paper backup. It's interesting, when Richard Stevens, who started this in 1989, he was the first epidemiologist who thought that lighting had a problem. He had no proof at the time, but he's an epidemiologist, he looks for patterns. People poo-pooed it, and then more studies came out in the 90s showing him right, then studies in the 2000s, then the 2010s. Now there are something like 30,000 papers in the medical literature worldwide showing that blue light is a problem. So this isn't speculation anymore. This is proven scientific fact. So blue light suppresses melatonin, and that's a hormone that influences circadian rhythms. Even dim light can affect circadian rhythm. Eyes are exposed to blue light decrease visual acuity because blue light scatters. I'm going to show you that in some slides. So the Bioenvironment Working Group had these goals: review the existing literature on all of this, cancer, diabetes, obesity, and as well as the environment, birds, mammals, amphibians, and come up with, put together a paper, a section for that, and put out recommendations to the UN. I should say this whole paper has gone to the UN COPUOS, and hopefully they'll release it to the General Assembly at some point when things like war in Ukraine and mass starvation is out of the way, so they can concentrate on this. They're a little preoccupied right now for obvious reasons. But the paper's in. So here's the bioenvironment team. I was part of it. I was a presenter as well. James Lowenthal, by the way, is in Massachusetts. He's with which university right now? He's in Western Mass. Travis Longcore is one of the best environmental scientists I've ever met. He's at University of California, and he's produced numerous papers. In fact, he helped me write the UN paper. He's a fantastic presenter. So, in fact, that may be, I'm sure we could probably get him to do a Zoom meeting for us. So here are the main presenters. I was one of the main presenters. Melatonin, this is what we're talking about. This is the hormone. It's produced by the pineal gland, and you produce it when you're in the dark. During the daytime, you produce essentially zero. It's related to mood and depression. It affects reproductive physiology and may affect women's fertility. It helps fight breast cancer. Now, let me explain that. Melatonin or lack of melatonin doesn't cause cancer. Okay, because I get asked this all the time. Let me explain how this works. Melatonin is an adjuvant. What that means is when you produce it during sleep at night, the body goes through a repair cycle, gets rid of dead cells, cleans up the brain from memories, gets rid of toxins. Sleep is important. That's why we sleep. If you don't believe it, try staying up for a week without sleep. You'll collapse. Okay, there's a reason why we sleep, and it's basically to clean up. But the melatonin gets produced at night, helps you fall asleep. The melatonin is an adjuvant, and by that I mean we have an immune system composed of certain cells, like T cells and killer cells, immune cells that are produced, recognize an antigen and go and kill it. So that's how we fight diseases. That's how you get over a cold. Your immune system kills off the cells that are damaged and the viruses and the bacteria. What melatonin does is it stimulates and enhances the effectiveness of our killer T cells. So hopefully this is not kind of a shock to you, but we produce billions of new cells every day. And all that reproduction, that division, there's bound to be some mistakes. Those mistakes mostly die off because they're mistakes. A few of them live and are cancerous, meaning they can replicate themselves. That's a cancer. We produce, it's estimated, 8 to 10 cancer cells every single day in your body since the day you were born, but we're not dead of cancer. Why? Because we have an immune system that recognizes this is a bad cell, attaches to it, and kills the cell. That's why we don't die of cancer from the week we're born. So if you think about that, all melatonin does is is stimulate the immune system to help kill off these daily cancer cells that we produce. So it's no stretch of the imagination if you think about this logically. If you suppress your melatonin, that means your immune system isn't as strong. A couple of those, maybe 1 or 2 of those cancer cells now slip through the cracks. That's why there's an increase in hormonal related cancers if you have suppressed melatonin. Hopefully that makes sense. That any longer explanation require a full medical talk, which I'm sure you don't want to hear. So actually we talked about rods and cones earlier, right? But there is we have 3 cones, which are red, green, blue, our color vision, and rods. One, it only sees primarily in the greenish area, but it's not color, doesn't give you any color. It just allows you to see in the dark. And some are for motion, as we talked about earlier. But there's a 5th one that was discovered in 2003. No one knew this was there, although now it's nearly 20 years old. It's called Melanopsin. That particular cell has nothing to do with vision, even though it's embedded in our retina. That cell goes to the pineal gland, and its only purpose appears to be to suppress melatonin from the pineal gland. So if you're blind, you never get suppression, your melatonin's up all the time. If you're a normal sighted person and you lived in a cave, as a caveman, this is how we evolved. Blue light would come in from the sky, you know it's daylight, and the melanopsin suppresses pineal gland and stimulates the reticulum part of the brain and wakes you up. It makes you ready to go. And at night, when it's dark, melatonin rises, melanopsin doesn't get any signal, and your body starts saying, I'm sleepy. Okay? That's how our human, and that's the only purpose of that cell, is to control our wake life cycle. So here is, I'm going to go through this quickly because you've heard my talk before on this, but why did the AMA get involved? Because the lighting industry took no account of environmental or human health effects when they're promoting their lighting practices. And they were furious that we even brought this up, absolutely furious. They've since calmed down, and hopefully now that they're partnered with the IDA, good things will go future, although I'm still not particularly happy with them. I mean, I've saved some of these emails. I got hate mail from the IES. That's unbelievable. It's just plain unbelievable. Basically, the letter said, stay in your lane, you're just a doctor. And so my response to them was kind of like the gun industry. I'll stay in my lane. I put it in nicer ways, but I'll stay in my lane when you stop poisoning my patients with your bad lighting. So that's why the AMA got involved, because it was a human health issue. Because the only way to get something past the AMA is, one, it's got to be scientifically proven. Okay, this went through multiple reviews through several universities. And 2, it's got to have a health angle. Okay, so that's why we got involved. The fact that I was an amateur astronomer, was interested and helped push it, that's another matter. So glare. The thing about LEDs is they're pinpoints, and when they focus on the back of your retina, they're extremely annoying to the point where you want to go like this, right? When you see, you want to raise your hands and block the light because they're so intense. Human tolerance is 50,000 nits. Many of these are in the millions. And that's why you have an aversion to, it's like looking at the surface of the sun, except it's pinpoint. So why do elderly drivers have a problem? So a little bit of physiology here. When you're born, you have a lens that has no blood cells that go into it. Unlike every other tissue in your body, that has blood cells to keep it alive. The lens only gets its nutrients through the liquid that surrounds it. So it gets all its oxygen and glucose through stuff that diffuses in the aqueous humor of the eye. And that diffuses into the lens and the cells stay alive. Once you hit about 40 to 50, average 45, the center of the lens is now thick enough, the lens is thick enough that the center doesn't get enough nutrients. It starts to die. And when it dies, it calcifies. So you get these microcalcifications in the center of the lens. And that's why you get more scatter. And what scatters the most? Blue. Red penetrates the best. So the more blue light you have, the more scatter you have, and you get this snowstorm effect when you're looking at a light. Okay. So here's a chart on this side. You can see my pointer, right? So I'm not just, okay. So when you're young, 20 years old, it takes like 1,800 Lamberts before you get what's called disability glare, where the glare is so bad you don't see well. When you're age 60, 1/3 as much. So the older you are, the less light it takes to give you disability glare. That's why older drivers have a problem. The second part of that, and this is a chart from a researcher in Netherlands, I forget his name right now. Actually, I should have put those at the bottom. Should always reference my slides. He took human eyes, and notice this is a log scale over here, and shown blue light, green, yellow, and red light. And lo and behold, the blue scatters the most. These are through human eyes, okay? And that's not surprising. Why is the sun red at night as it's setting, right? In the evening? Because the blue scatters most through a denser atmosphere. So only the red penetrates. Same thing in the human eye. So the red penetrates. So if you have lights that are warm, you can see better because you don't have the big scatter from the blue and the green. Simple physics. Now, the IS kept making these ridiculous statements that you need the 4,000 K lights in order to see better down the road. So Alan Lewis is one of the former presidents of the IAS who disagrees with them. And I'm using his slide with his permission. So here you have 2,700, 3,500, and 6,000 K LED lights. This is his own research, his own testing. Notice that you can see better. The difference is just a couple of feet in seeing down the road. Okay, so, and eccentricity just means if you're looking off to the side, but you know, you shouldn't be looking at the buildings on the side of the road. You should be looking down the road. Down the road, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference by their own data. That's why they haven't sent me any papers, because their own data proves them wrong. And I use that all the time against them. Ronald Gibbons, also IS, he's at Virginia Tech. He's one of the good guys who supports good lighting. And he showed that he did studies with clear weather, fog, and rain. Now in clear weather, the old 1800 high pressure sodium was best. You could see best down the road. 6,000 K was the worst. Okay, basically everything the IES tells you, these lighting engineers, is a lie. They don't look at their own data. Now, is blue light a health risk? Yes, it is. So I already talked about the melanopsin, goes to the pineal gland and stimulates the limbic system. That's how you wake up. That's how you fall asleep. Here's a graph showing the different, what time is it, by the way? How am I doing? Can I keep going for another 10 minutes? Okay, so the Melanopsin suppression peaks at about 460. The lighting engineers say, well, we should have 4,000 K. The way they make these lights is they take a blue LED and put a phosphor on it. This is what you're trying to get, this big hump over here, because that's the useful light. The problem is you get this spike over here that shines through the phosphor of blue light. It's completely useless light. If you had an amber LED, you'd have none. At least you can minimize it by going to 2700 K. There, the blue peaks here. And you get a big rise in the useful light, which is in the warmer section, which is why we should be using 2700 or below. I already told you that the melatonin is an immune adjuvant. It also controls our daily clock gene. Many of our genes are controlled by our internal clock. That's why you get jet lag. Well, it turns out 5 to 10% of all our genes are clock controlled. So is it a big stretch of the imagination to say that if you screw up your circadian rhythm and you screw up 10% of your gene manifestations in the course of a day, you're going to have a problem? Of course you are. It's still being worked out why, but it is a problem. By the way, the people who figured this out, 2017 won the Nobel Prize in Medicine. So at least the Nobel Committee thinks I'm right and the lighting engineers wrong. Circadian disruption, as you would of course expect sleep and cognition problems, but there's now evidence for breast and prostate cancers, obesity, diabetes, and mood disorders. Breast cancer. This was all proposed at first that if you have melatonin suppression, you should have shift workers a higher risk. That's now proven by multiple studies. Blind women are lower risk. That's proven. Okay, this is one study that I read, which is incredible if you think about it. They found twin women around the world. They got 400 twins, one of which was blind. I don't know how they could find that many twins with one person blind and the other one not, but there was something like 400 people in the study. And sure enough, even though they're twins, exact same genes, exact same environment, one blind, one not, the blinded one had a much lower risk of breast cancer than the unblinded one, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. So here's my favorite study, and this is by David Blask from Tulane. Okay, so this just takes a little bit of explaining. Blask is a researcher. He worked with what's called nude mice. These aren't exhibitionist mice. They're mice that are bred to accept transplants. So he took these nude mice and transplanted human breast cancer into them, 120 of them. And they were broken up into lots of 20 mice. So the mice that had a normal day-light dark cycle, this is the rate of growth of the breast cancer. The ones that had just a tiny amount of light, this is less than a night light, had a slightly increased rate of breast cancer growth. The ones with more light had a higher rate of breast cancer. The ones that were put in constant light, no night cycle, the breast cancer literally exploded out of their chest. Proof positive that light will affect cancer rate growth. And this is human breast cancer implanted in a mice. So one of the best studies came right out of here in Massachusetts with Harvard, and although it's a countrywide study, they're the ones that ran the study. And they followed 110,000 women since the 1990s for a number of years till 2013, 89 till 2013, right there. And they were looking for a number of things as to human health, but one of them was the effect of light pollution. And the way they went back and what they did is they knew the zip code of everyone who was in the study, and they used satellite imaging of where that zip code was. And they broke up the 110,000 women into 5 quintiles. One was the highest rate of light pollution, one was the lowest. The ones from the highest to the lowest had a 14% increased risk of breast cancer. Okay, that's it. And everything in between had a slightly higher until you get to the highest rate. Now, you're never going to get 50% or higher because 60% of breast cancers are from the BRCA gene. That's genetic and that's unchangeable. But of the 40% that are left, this is about a third of them. Okay, so Harvard also came up with a similar study for men, and it shows prostate cancer increases in light pollution for the same reason. Melatonin suppression. Lest you think that study is an outlier, there are now 22 other studies that have shown the exact same thing all around the world. Now, I don't expect you to read this, but this one's from Israel, two are from Israel. This is another one from the USA. Here's from Connecticut, worldwide study, South Korea, and a bunch of others. Okay, and every one of them showed 12 to 17% increase in breast cancer. When you have 22 studies that show the exact same thing, you can't say it's a fluke anymore, right? I hope everyone agrees with that. There was one negative study from Canada, okay, and they went back and looked at that. Why was that one different? Well, it turns out in Canada, in the summertime, the sun never sets. So what do? You have light blocking shades. These people have light blocking shades, so they don't care what the outdoor lights are at night. They don't get to see them because they already have fixed the problem. That's why this one is the only negative study. So many cities have adopted 4,000K lighting. New York City, one of the worst light polluted areas in the universe, started putting up 4,000K lights in Queens. This is what it looked like from a person who lent me their slide. And it was awful. People hated it. They finally got New York City to put up 3,000K and no more 4,000K lights. Seattle was one of the first adopters. I think it was 2009. They put up 4,000K lights. 3 years ago, Seattle, out of constant pressure from the citizens, are replacing all their 4,000K lights. They're putting up 2,700 to 3,000K lights, and it should be finished in the next few years. Once you live on the 4,000K lights, you hate them. You don't realize how bad they are until you have to live with them. Pittsburgh, earlier this year, voted to replace all their 4,000K lights. So we're winning slowly because people are being annoyed by scenes like this. So so this is what the AMA basically said, that we should use LED lights because it decreases fossil fuel use and it's more energy efficient. We never said don't switch. Encourages minimizing and controlling blue rich light. That's where we get the lighting engineers, because for some reason they like blue lights. And all we said, and here it is in red, use 3,000K or lower. And I always keep forgetting the lower because at the time, 3,000 was the only thing we had. And all LED lighting should be properly shielded. I consider that common sense. I don't know why the ES took a conniption over it, but I'm glad to see this slowly coming around. Oh, this is Centaurus A from Florida. This is with my 14-inch. That's a great object, by the way. So let me just go through Travis Slankor's presentation quickly, and then pretty much at the end. Basically, the entire world, outdoor animals need nighttime dark lights, darkness. Okay, I already told you about bridges and how it affects fish in the water, bats, birds. Birds die all the time. Everyone know in Las Vegas, that pyramid that shoots up this light into the sky? Okay, here's what people don't know. They have a team that they hire every morning to go around the base of the building to sweep up all the dead birds. They basically collect about 40 to 100 dead birds every single day because they're attracted by that stupid beam. Okay, they should be bombed. They're mass killing birds because of that.
Right, and they crash into the building, right?
Well, they just circle around and just drop dead
And they
or
drop
crash
dead.
into. you know. Insects, 40% less insects than we had in 15, 20 years ago. Amphibian are affected. Migration routes of birds. Finally, Boston just signed on. We're going to shut off some lights during bird migration time. So, Toronto started that, and it's worldwide. Wherever birds go over big cities, they have major bird kills. So it's called the FLAP program to shut down some of the lights. Now, here's something you wouldn't expect, just to show you it affects everything, okay? So why is there algae all along the shores of Florida and many large cities? Now, they have all these algae blooms. Some of it's runoff of fertilizers, yes, but the algae naturally grow. What happens at night is zooplankton come up from the depths and eat it. And then in the daytime, they go back down to the depths to protect themselves. If there's light shining in the water, the zooplankton won't come up and eat it. That's one of the reasons we have all these algae blooms, because there's no zooplankton to eat it because we have so many damn lights in the water. Think about that. Who would have thought we'd be affecting algae growth and zooplankton? Ecological functions, birds, birds, bees, moths are all pollinators, and they're dying off. A lot of it's because of the lights. It affects the food supply. That's one of the reasons why they have to bring bees to farms to pollinate the crops, because there's less bees. So it affects plants as well. Let me move through this more quickly. So it affects reproduction of birds and insects. It affects plants. Trees that are lit up all the time die about half, only have half the lifetime of trees that are not. Okay, it's a proven fact. So if you want to protect your trees, don't light them up all night long. I don't know why, but this, but I think it's they've studied it. Superoxide radicals triggered stress responses in the trees. So here's a great quote. So it affects a lot of things. Here's a quote from the Nature paper in January 2019. And I'm going to read this. If a species is not yet known to be affected by artificial light at night, it is likely because we simply have not studied it yet. In he studied multiple different animals and plants. And he basically says everything he studies, there is an effect of light pollution on. Everything. He's yet to come across a negative study. So that's why he made that quote. He said, if it's not proven yet, it's probably because it hasn't been studied yet. So the conclusions are we should control light at night and avoid the adverse effects. This is Thor's helmet. So the rest is just a couple of slides and I'll answer questions. So protecting of ground-based observatories. This is what the UN wants to do. I know time's getting light, so I'm gonna skip over that. You already know all this anyways. This is from Tucson. You got light domes in the distance. This is from the observatory, Kitt Peak. You can see the light domes from Tucson and Phoenix, even though they have some relatively good light pollution control over there. World observatories are under threat. The Vera Rubin Observatory I mentioned is specifically under threat because they'll saturate the, you can get rid of the trails if it's not saturated. When you have something as sensitive as the Vera Rubin telescope, if it saturates the sensor, it's impossible to get rid of it. The imagers in the group know exactly what I'm talking about. So the recommendations to the UN were no development near ecologically sensitive sites, monitor nighttime conditions, and keep darkness as a natural resource, and restoration plans to claw back some night sky areas. Then the satellite working group has been mostly professionals looking at what they're trying to do. This is Starlink. This is a map with 4,400 satellites. Musk wants to put up 60,000. Okay, think about that. Not, and
All
this
right,
is,
I was going to say, Mario, I describe it as putting a chain link fence around the Earth.
that is correct. Here is an image from an as professional observatory. They can get rid of these faint ones. They can't get rid of this. No, they don't have a program to do that. You just lose data. And this is another observatory that got Starlink. So they tried to put some mitigation things. They're trying to orient them. They're trying to darken them. But all that did is go from magnitude 5.5 with the original to magnitude 7. It's still too bright for imaging, even though you won't see them visually. Then you have OneWeb. They were inspired by Musk. This is from England. They want to put up 50,000 satellites. Basically, if we let all these companies that are in a rush to corner the market, we'll have about 300,000 satellites by 2030. Okay, there will be no stars. There will be no astronomy. They're trying to get a national, this is one of the main reasons to submit it to the UN. Well, hopefully we'll get a international treaty on this. So the main recommendations are as seen there, but basically try to limit this and have national treaties. Radio observatories, same thing. There's another section just for that. And so I'll go through that, and it gives some recommendations on how to limit that. So these are the final recommendations for COPUOS. So here's my image of the section of the Western Vale. So I'll stop there and answer any questions. If you want the actual UN report, here is the direct link. It'll come up as a small window, just download it, 296 pages, it's a PDF. However, to make it a little easier, if you want, go to my webpage, which is easy to remember. On the main page, go halfway down, you'll see more on light pollution. Click on that, and if you scroll down, you'll see a link directly to the UN report, as well as the links to my AMA reports and others.